Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and this afternoon I'm joined by Patrick McGilp and Chris McElwain, and we're here obviously for the next hour to talk all things Celtic. Gentlemen, we are living in phenomenal times. I'm going to come to you first, Patrick, because the worst you've ever seen is that time we conceded a corner, I think, in your lifetime. But we're going to wrap up another league title, let's hope, this weekend. How are you feeling going into that?
Excited, obviously, very excited. Tannadice, I was fortunate enough to be there 3 years ago when Ange sort of won the title back in his first season. That was a special night. Hopefully, it'll be a special day. Hopefully, the sun will be shining on the City of Discovery. I think it is the City of Discovery, isn't it? Dundee.
That's what it
Hope the
was
sun's
called.
shining
So
anyway.
they still call it that. What's been discovered
Uh,
up there? Is there? I don't know. I was going to say something. I better not.
hope,
For all our Dundee followers, I'm not saying it.
hopefully, 4 in a row. But no, I'm obviously very excited. You know, it's been a wonderful season coming to a close, and we've got sort of these two must-win games in order to sort of get it over the line. Not as tedious as some people have described it. I personally, I found it quite exciting when I was sitting in the sun celebrating our fourth and fifth goals at Hampden on Sunday. Um, it certainly wasn't tedious then either. The songbook on Sunday was brilliant. Just thousands of people singing from the first minute, having a great time. So it's been a wonderful 2 weeks since I've been last on, and it's hopefully a wonderful 4 or 5 weeks to see out the season. We've hit a bit of form. We obviously had a bit of a disappointing patch since coming away from Bayern. We've dropped a few points, but the last two performances have been great. We've scored 10 goals. So it's an exciting time. And Tannadice, it's not the worst away ground. You don't sort of dread it in the same way that you might dread going to Livingston or St Mirren. You sort of associate it with happy memories, or at least I do anyway. We've obviously got the famous title one of 2008 up there as well. So I think everyone's really looking forward to it. And hopefully we can seal the deal by getting, hopefully all 3 points, but we only need the one. But fingers crossed for all three.
Yeah, 100%. Because you want to continue. We were talking yesterday about continuing that momentum, Chris, within the remaining league games. Obviously, there is always something to play for when you've got a Scottish Cup final. That's what I think's great. That's like the end of the rainbow, if you like, for these guys, and they need to get a jersey for the cup final. So there's plenty to play for, even if and when we wrap this up. And again, looking back at the times that we've won the title at Tannadice, we've mentioned this before, we've already won it 3 times. So not only could we be going for 4 in a row, Patrick, in terms of league titles, it could be 4 league titles wrapped up in the history of the club at Tannadice. And you've mentioned the one each game under Ange. Giakoumakis, who wrote his name into Celtic history that night. The one previous to that, Jan Vennegoor as Hesselink, who writes his name into the history books. So you've got all this riding on it as well, Chris. All these can be personal accolades. I mean, how great would it be if Big Ida was able to write his name into the folklore of this football club? I know he's already done a Scottish Cup final winner, but people remember clinching the league. I always remember the 87-88. We watched the game not that long ago, Chris, you and I, and it's Chris Morris with a goal and Andy Walker with 2. You always remember these league clinchers, don't you?
You do, and you mentioned Adam Ida. He's done it before. He's got these kind of big moments in his game. So yeah, it could be a good one, but I don't really care who gets the goals, to be honest. I think what's important is that we are hitting form at a really good time, just in time to really get things wrapped up and then take that momentum, as you say, into the cup final. Some recent great performances, and not just for the core group of players you'd expect, but actually some guys who are coming in out of the cold as well, which is great. James Forrest stepping in, making an impact again. Adam Ida has come in, he's scored a goal the other day, so you're hoping he just kicks on as well. Reo Hatate sitting in a real purple patch just now with the way he's playing. So it's good to see. I think it's anything but tedious at the moment. I'm loving every single minute of it. And I can't wait to get my next fixer some sort of Celtic content. So let the people who moan about boring leagues or tedious leagues leave them to stew their own bitterness. As far as I'm concerned, I just want to bring on the next games, take our momentum in, and get that treble over the line.
Without a doubt, Jungle Lion brings it up here. TDS treble on the horizon. This is now going to be called the TDS treble. We're just going to turn this right on its head. You know how they've always got the T-shirts when we win the leagues, and it's "We never stop" and all this kind of stuff. What was the one bringing back the thunder under Lenny? The Ronnie Roar. We always had these kind of slogans. It's the TDS treble. They've written the script for us, guys.
I just think TDS. I think not.
I know. Smell the glove obviously was a famous one as well.
Yeah.
TDS treble on the horizon, and what's more tedious is not reporting on cheats and their minus every year. Talking, of course, about the debts getting racked up year on year elsewhere. Let's no report on that. Let's call Celtic success tedious. Yes, we stuck right into that story yesterday and spoke about it for a good 20-30 minutes. You've mentioned one player who I never focused on yesterday, but it was my intention to do so, Patrick, because I've called him the last great maverick. It's Reo Hatate. He comes in, he sets up 3 goals in 12 minutes. He gives us all an insight into the brilliance of Reo at his absolute peak. And then you start discussing whether or not he's going to be part of the team next season. And I've already put it out there, I want him to be. I don't think he's hit his peak at Celtic yet. I still think he could hit a run of consistency under Brendan Rodgers. Brilliant performance by Reo. We've seen both sides of him this season, Patrick. Where do you stand on him? Do you think that he's here for the foreseeable, or do you think he's one of the guys that might have felt as though he's kind of completed his own personal Scottish football ambition, if you like, by the end of this season?
It's a hard one to judge, isn't it? Because I think he's sort of at that age now where if he's going to get a big move, it's going to be, this year or next year. It's going to be sometime soon. You've seen Kyogo, I'm not saying he should have left Celtic, but at the age of 30, he was sort of scrambling around for a top 5 club, and it's not worked out for him at all. But you've seen other players leave Celtic and obviously have great success in the Premier League. Wanyama, Virgil van Dijk, a lot of different guys have went elsewhere and succeeded. So he'll probably be weighing up his options. I think the fact he's been here for 3.5 years is probably weighing on everyone's mind. We sort of certainly before COVID, we only seemed to get about 2 years out of players like that. Since COVID, we've sort of managed to hold on to these players a bit longer with top quality managers like Rodgers and Ange, and with the Champions League football and the sort of constant racking up of trophies and silverware. I think he's probably more likely to leave than most other players. If I was to guess, I don't want him to leave, especially the form that he's in. I think he's been absolutely sensational the last couple of games. A hat-trick of assists in the first half speaks for itself. I think he'd have to go a long way to peak at Celtic based on what we've seen in Ange's second season. I felt as if he could have been Player of the Year in that second season under Ange. I thought he was absolutely brilliant almost every week. Under Brendan, he's obviously had a few disappointing games, but you have seen in short bursts just how brilliant he is. In terms of trying to pick a pass, breaking the lines, putting the ball through to the strikers, he's probably second to none in the team. He's probably the best at it. It's just when it doesn't come off, you get incredibly frustrated, and I think it probably gets to him as well. It knocks his confidence, and you can't afford to lose the ball high up the pitch all that often in football these days. But I want him to stay. I want the core of the team to stay the same. I think the nature of things. I think the way that Brendan was speaking after the St Johnstone game. I think 1 or 2 are probably going to leave. So I think he's more likely than not. To be honest, I think him and Kuhn maybe are the 2 more likely to leave. You don't want a guy like Carter Vickers to leave. You certainly don't want a guy like Maeda to leave. They've been absolutely crucial to us, especially this season. But I would love Reo to stay. The form that he's in just now is absolutely sublime, and hopefully, as Chris was saying, he's a big part of us sprinting over the line and finishing well.
It's interesting there where you mentioned Kuhn. Obviously, these comments that Brendan made after the St Johnstone game, Chris, you've got to remember them because it gives them something to think about in the summer. I also thought Schlupp probably came into that category, whereby there's a decision to be made on Schlupp in the summer. And from what we've kind of seen in the last few weeks, the decision's probably turned on its head because there was a time with Schlupp, for example, maybe around about the second Bayern Munich game where I'd assigned him there and then. And then all of a sudden you see the form dropping and the word mentality getting used by Brendan Rodgers. And it's massive because it's a buzzword, isn't it? Mentality. But I think what he's looking at is these guys may well be good enough technically, but are they good enough upstairs when it comes to turning up every single week for Celtic, twice a week for 6 months of the season, and never allowing the standards to drop? There is an argument to be made around Reo, where maybe he's achieved everything he would at Celtic, but surely the Champions League endeavours this season, Chris, would give him food for thought when it comes to, could we maybe push it even further next season? Or do you think he's come to the end of his cycle? Chris McElwain.
He's not came to the end of his cycle at Celtic for me. I think he's got at least another season in. There's a couple of reasons for that. One you've mentioned, the Champions League progress we made this year. That's got to whet the appetite for players, existing players and players maybe coming into the club to say, look, actually, when we get recruitment and investment and strategy right, we can go and compete. And I don't care what anyone said. I know there was a couple of fairly sore results in there, but overall as a campaign, I thought that was a campaign to be proud of because it showed a marked improvement on where we'd been in previous years. And the manager and all the players and staff deserve immense credit for that. I think there's a couple of other elements to Hatate staying. One, I think you've started to see in recent games, he's taking his game to another level. He's no longer just about getting the ball and distributing it and trying to get those killer passes. He's carrying the ball forward. He's taking responsibility. And I think there's been elements throughout the season where he's shown a degree of maturing as a player and being more of a consistent value add member of the team. And I think another season, his level will just go up again. And I think you really will get the benefit of all his capabilities and his attributes. And the third reason is just look at Jota, look at his teammate. Someone who did move on for, whether it be financial reasons, ambition, whatever, it doesn't matter, moved on. And for a guy of his undoubted quality, it didn't work out. And it didn't work out due to various circumstances, but it didn't work out. Now, look at the fact he, still very much in his prime, has had the opportunity to come back to Celtic. Look how he's embracing it. Look how he's actually, even when he's dropped out the team, his attitude is still, well, that's fine, that's down to the manager. I've got to get in and prove that I belong here. And he comes in and he does it in the best way with a goal. That, for me, not just for Hatate, but even young players who are maybe getting tempted to leave or looking at big money moves, the grass isn't always greener. And I think you've got to recognise not necessarily where you're going, but what you're leaving behind. So for me, I think there's more incentive for Reo Hatate to stay. Certainly more incentive for us as supporters, and I would suggest the club, because a little bit similar to Daizen Maeda, how much would you have to spend to replace what Hatate brings to the team?
Well, there's a couple of good points in there, Chris, because I heard after the Kyogo move kind of went sour, Jota, Matt O'Reilly. We know there's different reasons for this. Matt O'Reilly had some really bad injuries since he's gone to Brighton. Jota, it was the wrong move, but we were never going to say no to £25 million. Wrong move for the player. And people were saying, well, I'll throw this one to you first, Barry. People were saying, well, that put players coming to Celtic where we're selling it as a platform, but then obviously the moves aren't working. I see it completely differently. I would say if you're a young player, what I would be saying to a young player to come to Celtic is they moves might not have worked out for the three players. And it's, Matt O'Reilly, I wouldn't write him off just yet. However, what we did as a football club is we gave them time to develop. I don't think, Kyogo's been written off. He's only been at the club a few months, Ren. Jota was written off almost instantly when he went to Saudi Arabia. And Matt O'Reilly's not even been at Brighton for a whole season. I mean, he played for Celtic this season. He's not even been at Brighton for a whole season and people are writing him off. So what I would say is actually when you come to Celtic, we give you the time. Matt O'Reilly became the £26 million player over 2.5 seasons at Celtic. We give you the time to develop and progress as a footballer rather than you come to us and we'll just write you off. So I think each of those individual moves haven't worked for various reasons. But I don't think, Patrick, it's going to put anyone off coming to Celtic in the future and using the club as a platform because we know that loads of players do that, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with Matt O'Reilly, there's certainly still question marks. I mean, he got a nasty injury, I think 12 minutes into his debut, comes back 4 months later, scores the winner at home to Man City. Mm-hmm. I've to be fair, I've not followed much of his career since he scored that goal against Man City. I know he's been sort of in and out of the team, but getting a move to Brighton, I'm sure a lot of footballers would look at that and say that's a successful career move. I mean, I think he's only a month older than I am, so he's 24. Spent 2.5 years at Celtic, 2.5 years, moved to Brighton, Premier League player. I'm sure there's a lot of guys who are, say, 18, 19, not getting a game for MK Dons who would quite fancy following that pattern. With Jota, I mean, that's a money thing, isn't it, that move? There was no hiding that at all. He didn't go there for football reasons. If someone's offering to pay you £800,000 every month, tax-free, you're going to say yes. And because it is a money move, it was a success because he made a lot of money. His football obviously suffered for 18 months, but he's obviously sort of changed his life and his family's life. With Kyogo, obviously, it appears to be a disaster so far, and he would probably have to leave Rennes, in my opinion, for that to succeed. But, he was, 25, 26, and became an absolute superstar for 3.5 years at Celtic. He was the main man for 3.5 years. Scored goals in Europe, scored goals in derby games, scored goals in cup finals. So I don't think it's a bad advert either. So there's plenty of reasons for players to still come up here. We've got a top class manager. We're winning trophies. We play in front of 60,000, and we're now competitive in European competition. So we're probably maximising our sort of value as an advert to these players to try and attract these players. I think we spoke in the past as well about Schlupp, Schmeichel, Joe Hart, that type of player who have maybe played in the Premier League or coming to the end of their career, or maybe want to pick up a few trophies and still feel like the main man. And, when you've played at the top level and you're maybe on the way out, Celtic for a year or two isn't a bad place for you to go. And obviously we've seen with Schmeichel and Joe Hart, maybe not Schlupp, that it can work. I mean, Schmeichel's been absolutely tremendous this season. Totally revolutionised us playing out from the back. So I don't have any worries about attracting players. Obviously, as time marches on and there's all this speculation about Brendan's contract, a key aspect of that and a key aspect of our success is having a top quality manager. I mean, we spoke about all the success that we've had since 2016. I think we're going for our 6th treble in 9 seasons. We've had a top quality manager for almost every one of them, whether it's Rodgers or Ange. So going forward, whether it's an extension for Brendan or doing our absolute best to get a top quality manager in, that is a crucial part of how we are run as a football club, because Dermot seems to just give all the faith to the guy in charge, and it's obviously a massive part of attracting players as well. So that would be my main concern going forward, but I don't have any concerns about attracting players while we're in the Champions League and while Brendan Rodgers is here.
Well, you talk about the Champions League there as well, and all I've been hearing over the last few days is, how easy it is, and you get whipped when you play in Europe and all this kind of nonsense. Well, yeah, there was a Borussia Dortmund outlier, Chris, but this season was what we would regard as progress in terms of European football. And by the way, when Brendan Rodgers came back to the football club, that was probably the only blot in his textbook in terms of being a Celtic manager first time round. We didn't get that run, did we? That you looked at and thought that was a really good European run. We've now got that under our belts. And with the changes in the formatting of the Champions League, as a football club, Celtic should be aiming for 10 games every season at that level. And you know what? That might even develop further. It might even develop further so that more games could, if qualified, could be guaranteed to teams like Celtic. That's massive, not only for retaining a manager like Brendan Rodgers, not only for attracting new players to give them the platform that they want to play on, but also, when you talk about the words tedium and you talk about boredom and all this kind of stuff, it actually does add a lot of excitement and entertainment to the fan base as well, beyond the domestic game, Chris. So we've got to be looking at that every single season. We can't take our eye off that ball, I don't think. It's not about participation, is it? It's about actually competing at that level again, Chris.
Yeah, I think we've gone beyond just being grateful to be there, to actually say, no, we're here and we've got a purpose in being here. And I think, again, what you saw this season was a manager, I think even he adapted at times. We had a really bad result against Dortmund, but the next game we set up slightly differently, just tweaks, but they made such a difference. So I think, and you hope that Brendan is looking at the potential for next year and saying, okay, how do we build on what we did? Because as great a run as it is, it will live short in the memory if we go and we revert back to type where we're under strength and underprepared and we capitulate against these teams. Because as I said earlier, with the right preparation, with the right investment, with the right recruitment, and with the right manager in place, we made a huge leap forward in Europe compared to recent years. And I think that's something you now want to. Nobody's saying we want to go and take it a step further in terms of immediately qualifying for the next round, or getting to the quarterfinals or the semi-finals. I think that's still, we should aspire to that, but I think that's still more of a mid to longer term goal. Short-term goal here and short-term objective should be trying maintain that level of performance in the Champions League, and if we can, take the opportunities to build on it. It's going to be difficult, right? I mean, like your club, other clubs that are going to be in that competition are not sitting still. They'll be looking at ways they can strengthen. A few of them maybe didn't perform in this new format the way they would have liked, so they'll be looking to address that as well. So the competition isn't going to get any easier, right? So it's up to us to try and continue to elevate and progress as a club. What annoys me about this perception within certain circles that our domestic competition is tedious and us getting spanked in Europe all the time, which is a false narrative. It's just it's low hanging fruit for some outlets. Is that I can understand our rivals not wanting us to do well in Europe, right? That's fair enough. You're a rival supporter. That's great. But why is the rest of this of Scottish football, and why is the associations affiliated with Scottish football not looking and saying, how do we embrace the fact that we've got a club in Europe's top competition and doing well and progressing? How can we not do more to promote that? How can we not do more to show that in a positive light and say, look, Scotland's, forever perceived as a small nation and this, so far down the football and food chain, yet top table, and we're up against some real big boys there and we're playing well. Why are we not getting that level of support from wider circles? Don't mean coming from governing Ibrox, that's fine. No issue with that. And I feel kind of the same when I see them in Europe. But the bigger picture has to be looked at. And I think the media has almost a responsibility to help enforce or reinforce that view. To say, you know what, this is good for us. This is good for us as a football nation. We've got a team in there. But no. It's just, instead of that, it's just like, you've been built up, knock you down.
Thing is, Chris, is on the one hand, you've got the media who do nothing but batter Scottish football, right? That's no print media or just online, but even the commentary teams. I've said this before. How often do they say that something that happens within a Scottish game is a world-class save or a world-class goal? They never say it. They never big up the Scottish game. And then you've got the people in the associations, the SFA, SPFL, who are inept. They're inept. They've won a watch. They don't know what to do with Scottish football. When they're talking about reconstruction of the leagues and even pitching as an option a 10-team top league, absolute ridiculous. If there's anything monotonous about Scottish football, Patrick, it's playing the same team 4 times every year. That has been the case for a long, long time. And you can expand it. Brendan Rodgers spoke about it just the other week. It was pitched to him at a press conference, Patrick, and he says, if we're going to do anything, we've got to expand. So yes, absolutely. There's loads of things that can be done to make the Scottish game less monotonous, but it's not Celtic winning. It's let's restructure the league. Let's make that less monotonous, and that's something that could be put into place fairly quickly, Patrick. There's no plan. There's no 5, 10, 15-year plan. Liam Carrigan blows my mind when he tells me Japanese football's 30 years into a 100-year plan. We're not 30 days into a 100-day plan in Scottish football, Patrick.
That is pretty impressive. No, I mean, you can tell that they don't really have a plan. They're just sort of throwing ideas out there and hope one of them will stick, seeing the sort of media and public reaction. I think we've known for a long time, every time the TV deal has been negotiated, you see how incompetent and how inept these people are. I know sometimes we criticise Celtic when they fail, and I think Acsom's criticism of Celtic when it does come about is justified, because we want what's best for the club, and I don't think any of us on this podcast have unrealistic expectations. But we do have some pretty impressive people at the club, and a lot the people who run Celtic are 10 times more qualified in their roles than the people who run the SFA. Even if you had, a sort of, people who are running Celtic were running the SFA, I think Scottish football would be in a much better position. And I agree with Chris as well. Apart from your rivals, I want to see every Scottish team do well in Europe. And Hearts were unlucky this year. They sort of almost get through at the next stage, but Scottish teams do have to sort of pull their weight a wee bit more. Try and get that regular whether it be Europa League or Conference League, match day revenue, TV revenue, try and get into the next stages, to try and just sort of boost the brand. And obviously Celtic this season have made that next step in Europe, and hopefully we can sort of keep that up and continue doing that. But yeah, it doesn't help when you're run by totally incompetent individuals at the SPFL and the SFA. I agree with yourself and Brendan, and probably every sensible person, that the league restructuring has to be an expansion of the league. I think I suggested an 18-team league a few weeks ago. It's what they do in Holland, it's what they do in Germany, it's what they do in Portugal. And it would also reduce our league games by, I think, 4 games. So you'd be able to focus more on Europe. I know Rangers fans were complaining that they were maybe wanting a derby game moved for their 2 semi-final fixtures that they've got coming up in the Europa League. Oh no, wait, sorry, they get knocked out. But they do have a history of complaining about league games not being moved or postponed for European games, even though they don't win any finals anyway. They leave that to us. But no, I mean, I think a league structuring would benefit clubs on the European front. I actually think it would make the league more exciting, having only 2 derby games. I know we might get less money for the TV deal, and that's something that we need to work around. But it would certainly give a bigger build-up to the derby. You couldn't have these sort of idiots on Twitter from England saying, Celtic playing Rangers for the 100th time this season. The 2 games, if it was 2 games, it would be absolutely massive in the title race, especially in a close-run thing. So I think we need better management of the game. I think the league could benefit from restructuring. And fingers crossed for Celtic, Aberdeen, Hibs, Hearts, whoever, that they can make progress next season, and they can win a few games, pick up a few coefficient points, bank that money, and be sensible with that money. Because that's another problem that we face.
Yeah.
We obviously had issues with the old board in the early 90s, but other clubs in Scotland, it's like a merry-go-round. I think Dundee have been in administration 5 or 6 times.
More times than any other club in world football. Dundee. There's a world record for you.
So we need better financial management as well, clearly. I think even clubs in the south side of Glasgow could benefit from that, and I'm not just talking about Third Lanark. So there's a lot to do, but hopefully Celtic can fly the flag, lead the way. And I've seen some comments online about dropping into the Europa League. We've obviously got the playoff. Regardless of what happens, I think we've got a playoff to play. I think back to Martin O'Neill, 3rd season, losing to Basel, getting all the way to the final. Brendan, 3rd season, playoff game. I would prefer to be in the Champions League myself. I would rather be in the Champions League. There was talk a few years ago about Rosenborg from Norway getting into the Champions League group stage 13 seasons in a row. To bank the money, to get the coefficient points, to cement yourself as a regular participant and a competitive participant, getting into that top 24. It would be nice for Brendan to get a run in the Europa League, because I think it's somewhere that we could go far in, but I think long term you need to think about the money, and the Champions League is where we should be and where we should aim to be.
No, I agree with that because I have seen a lot of the comments coming through as well, Patrick, and I understand people want to have a kind of lengthy run in Europe, but I would much rather be competing at the top table in the first tier tournament, even if it means that it's a much longer plan to try and develop. I think the expansion of the Champions League has given clubs like Celtic, clubs who are in the same kind of size leagues as Celtic, more of an opportunity to progress, and it was a breath of fresh air this season. And then to come so close, agonisingly close to pushing Bayern Munich to extra time over in Germany was just, I think, an indication of what can be done, because I don't think we actually approached those 2 games in the best shape in terms of the squad. You look at the first game at Celtic Park, thinking about some of the chances. Would Kyogo have put one away? It's all conjecture, but we certainly shouldn't have been going into these games without another striker, particularly on the bench. You looked at the changes that were not made in Germany, and you're thinking, is he saving them for the extra time? I don't know, but we didn't bring on the full complement of subs. Is that because we looked at the bench and thought it's not strong enough? So we could do even better with a few tweaks moving forward over a couple of campaigns. Loads more to discuss, and Celtic 88 has come in. I love that analogy of the crabs in a bucket. You know, you'll never get out that bucket because they'll always just pull you back in. And that's it. It's always me and my own people competing. Absolutely. I get that. Now, I'm going to bring up an image. I want everybody to brace themselves. I'll ask you the question first, Chris. In combined transfer fees, who is the most expensive Scottish footballer of all time? Do you know that? Patrick knows the answer. Do you know the answer?
Combined transfer fees, Ollie Burke, is it not?
It certainly is, and there he is. Look at that. It's Ollie Burke. Look at him. You know, he was born in Kirkcaldy. He is the second greatest sportsman ever to come out of Kirkcaldy after Jockey Wilson. Anyway, I was reading, interestingly enough, Brendan Rodgers just threw his name into a press conference, remember? Just randomly.
Yeah.
I was watching Oliver Burke. I was just reading the other day there that Ollie Burke is going to be the first ever Scottish player to sign and play for Union Berlin. He has turned down a contract extension at Werder Bremen, where he's been scoring in recent weeks. And you know what? Quinny actually said that the other week that he'd started scoring. He's been keeping an eye on his performances. Now, there's only so long you can say this, Patrick, that Ollie Burke has got the best football agent in world football. Maybe he's actually got something about him. Maybe he's actually got what clubs are looking for, because this is a man who is, as we currently sit here, Scottish football's most expensive player. I mean, if Scott McTominay was to get a transfer, I'm pretty sure he would leapfrog him. But he started off at Nottingham Forest, and the clubs that he's played for permanently are RB Leipzig, West Bromwich Albion, Sheffield United, Werder Bremen, and obviously he's moving on to Berlin. And on loan, he spent time at Bradford City, Celtic, Alaves, Millwall, and Birmingham City. The curious case of Oliver Burke, Patrick. What do you make of it all?
Well, I mean, he certainly get pace, so he did when he was at Celtic, and he's an absolute unit as well. He looks massive, so you know that could appeal to people. You know, fast, get in behind, target man. I think I seem to remember he came to Celtic as a winger, and we sort of used him as a striker. I think I could be wrong on that, but you know, Brendan got a sort of good spell out of him for the sort of 4 or 5 weeks that he had him. I was a bit disappointed. This is how far we're going back. He started him against Valencia, and he really should have started Edward. But I mean, that's 6 years ago. I don't think he really sort of hit the heights under Lennon. I remember he missed some pretty poor chances. I mean, he really should have scored a lot more goals. And I think that might be the story of his career. I mean, I think he was still a relatively young player at Celtic, and he could have sort of went on and to hit greater heights. And there was a lot of excitement. With the Scottish national team, obviously, I think he scored in one of Clark's first games, scored a winner in the 90th minute. So, maybe he didn't hit the heights that we all thought he would when he was 21, 22, but pacey player, strong. Under Brendan, you can see a good manager can get the best out of him. He obviously does have a fantastic agent, getting all those transfer fees. I bet you that agent, he's made a few quid out of all those moves.
He looks after Kazim Richards as well, apparently.
Is it mandatory that all of his players have to move at least once every 12 months?
Oh, yeah.
Because Ollie Burke's had 10 clubs you've listed off there, and calling Kazim Richards he must be 20 plus. He's competing with Tony Watt. But he's obviously done well. That agent getting all those moves, getting all that money for Ollie Burke. Not a classic Celtic player. He obviously played his part in that period of time, a sort of hectic period of time, those 3-4 months. And good on him. I mean, Union Berlin, I think, is that who Juranovic plays for? Is Juranovic still there?
Is he still there? That's a great point, actually. Let me just check.
Because I remember when he went, they were up there for the Champions League and the title, and they sort of faded away. And then the last time I had a look, they were sort of towards the bottom of the table. Could they get relegated? So just going back to transfers as well, that's one that it obviously looked really good, and it obviously is really good getting a move to a Bundesliga team, first choice right back. They're maybe struggling a bit now, but that's another successful move. Juranovic going
still there.
Yeah. I think it was Poland, Celtic for 18 months, and then Bundesliga for the last 2.5 years. So good on him.
No, you're right, actually. That's one of the transfers, Patrick, that doesn't really get quoted when you're talking about people coming to Celtic and moving to bigger leagues. But Juranovic, he's still there. So obviously him and Ollie will be playing together next season as well. Some great comments coming through. Tell us if you think there's other great people from Kirkcaldy out there, because I think a member of Coldplay came for Kirkcaldy, but I said great people. So he plays guitar for Coldplay. He was from Kirkcaldy as well. Squeak even, 1888, grew up through the 90s. Tedious was never mentioned when simply the best was being forced on every Celt on their 9 in a row run. I, for one, am loving the hurt it causes them, and long may it continue. I think these things can coexist, Chris. You can love the hurt and you absolutely lap it up and lap up every single success that we get domestically, but also concurrently look at how else can we get better. And I think that on Acsom, we constantly do that, don't we? We always look at, right, at the moment we're winning things, so nobody really is laser focused on is our recruitment good enough in terms of the scouting of players? Have we got that right? What's Paul Tisdale doing, the football doctor and all that? That only seems to be focused on when we're not winning games. And youth development, we all know, right? We're banging on constantly about the incredible careers of James Forrest and Callum McGregor, both reared through the homegrown system, played over 1,000 games combined for Celtic. They've won over 50 trophies already. They're going to be two of the most decorated footballers in the history of the football club. They came through the ranks. When's the next one's coming through? That's a problem. Not all of Celtic's making, has got to be said, because obviously the culture of the game right now with an 18-year-old with agents telling them you could go here and you could be financially secure for the rest of your life, all that stuff. So that's another thing we can improve on. I think we've looked at the stadium a number of times on Acsom. You think to yourself, we can improve on that. Supporter experience, global fan base. There's loads of things. Merchandise, branding, I think we're pretty good there. But maybe on a global scale, we could increase the ante as well. And there's nothing wrong with those two things coexisting, Chris. Absolutely loving this level of success, but always striving to improve.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, I don't mind our rivals being better about what we're doing. I feel exactly the same. In fact, I did through the 90s as well. It was a rough period, but you focus on your own club, and I think you're right. We're not sitting here saying that our club does everything perfect. We don't. There's a lot of areas that we identify that we think we can improve on. I mean, look at recruitment in the last few years. there's been as many negatives as been positives. We'll look at the promotion and development of the women's game. I think that could, as the top club, we should be pioneering as much as we can in that front, and really trying to push the women's game and the women's team as much as possible to get it on an equal level of the how it is in England, etc. And I think you talk about various infrastructural improvements, youth recruit or youth development and retention. I think is a big one. How do we retain our most promising youth so we can bring through that next James Forrest or that next Callum McGregor? Because at the moment that doesn't look like there's an obvious candidate coming through there yet. But I don't think it's the responsibility of Celtic to elevate the Scottish League. I think it's the responsibility of Celtic to lead by example, because we are the biggest club, we are the most successful club, we are at the top of the tree at this moment in time, all earned through hard work, earned through years of good, strong management, particularly when you look back, apologies for the dog, clearly I've made a point he doesn't like, but through good, strong management and good decision making, following a real dark period in the early to mid 90s when we spoke about Jim's play, for example, illustrated the old board, and how the success that we tried to build on completely stagnated. Well, we arrested that, and we've moved on, we've developed. That should be the example and the benchmark for other clubs, even Rangers. Rangers should be looking at the mistakes they've made in the past, and they should be looking at how do we model our club in the best elements from a footballing sense in Celtic. Obviously principles and ethics aside, but from a footballing standpoint. And then you're looking at how Aberdeen started this season. Why weren't they able to maintain that and sustain that? How do they fix that going forward and make the league more competitive? I always look back at Jackie McNamara's time at Dundee United. Look at the team and the players that he started to develop. That was a great model. Gary Mackay, Stephen, Stuart Armstrong. I mean, okay, we kind of came in and took a bit of his talent. I'm not going to disguise that fact. But he was able to recognise the ability of those players and how they can build be part of the formation of a really good club. And you're looking for other clubs to recognise those positive elements and build upon them. So I think to label Celtic as the reason why Scottish football is boring and not progressing it's just misdirected. It absolutely is.
You know, even on the point of Jackie, as one example of that, Chris, I agree with you. If you look at the talent that he developed, spotted, not all just young football talent, but, you know, he brought in a player that Dundee United sold to Celtic for £1.5 million called Nadir Chifchi. And he brought him out of obscurity and somehow turned him into a £1.5 million footballer. And we've seen at Celtic that he was kind of far from it. But all the young guys that you mentioned, Ryan Gold and you got the Suter brothers, you know, you worked with both of them. And where is he now? Where is Jackie in Scottish football? Well, he's independent of Scottish football. He's someone who deals with players directly in an agency capacity, because nobody in Scottish football has identified just how good he is. You've got to have him running the academy. Not because he used to play for Celtic, because he's obviously really, really good at spotting talent and developing talent. Andy Robertson being another big example. There's loads of them. There are literally dozens of examples of players. And he's still spotting talent, but he's obviously, you know, not got a football club to utilise that in. So he's putting the players where he thinks the talent fits the club.
And I can't understand that, because he's got a proven record. And these are the kind of football minds. You know, I appreciate you need the business acumen and you need the ability to run an organisation, right? But you've got to marry it up with proper football-minded individuals. And Jackie, for me, absolutely exemplifies that. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to meet Jackie, and I was blown away by the intelligence that he puts across when he talks about football, when he talks about recruitment, he talks about the what you need as a player to make it. I'm thinking, why is our club not tapping into that? Never mind other clubs in Scotland. It's incredible. It's a missed opportunity.
Did you also know that Jackie wrote a sitcom and they made a pilot?
I did. I did.
Patrick, you might not know this. Right, so Jackie's funny. He's a funny guy, right? He does impressions and everything, right? And he wrote a sitcom and they recorded a pilot and he showed me it, right? This is one of the most surreal things I've ever experienced, right? So we did a gig, not January past, January last year, in Belfast. We're coming back, by the way, Paddy, hold my beer. And we're on the boat going over to Belfast. It's me, Simon Donnelly and Jackie. Check me out, that's 2 name drops. There you go. Right. And we got talking about just random stuff. And I said, I've heard that you wrote this. Is this true? And he was like, yep. And he brings his phone out and he starts showing me it on his phone. The pilot. And it's like a Scottish football comedy. It was, honestly, years and years ago. So I've actually said to Jackie, I don't know if he's up for this, but he's got it on disc. And I said, you know what? We could just upload that pilot onto Aksom's channel. Aye.
See it.
Why not? Simon Donnelly's in it, by the way. He's in the pilot. So yes, it's an interesting watch, that's for sure. Les Watts, I'm going to bring up a few more comments. I'm bloody late. Got caught up listening to the Huddle Breakdown. Listen, that's fine. That's all right. That's, you know, if you were listening to Elton John and you were held up, I'd have a problem with that. But you were listening to the Huddle Breakdown. That's fine. The Pork Chop Express, isn't it up to the rest of the clubs in the league to up the ante if one club is dominating? Can't expect Celtic to roll over and get tickled into submitting the trophies they've won in previous campaigns. Yeah, I do think you can pull it up, but there's so much wrong with the Scottish game that would need to be put in place to allow all these teams to breathe. Mike Myers' family lives there. Are we still talking about Kirkcaldy?
Kirkcaldy, yeah.
Times DJ. Is it?
Was it what was the one he's my son married an axe murderer and he portrays the Scottish family and the father a big Celtic fan, if I remember right? I
have not seen that. See, there you go. I'm going to have to seek that out the next time the missus is on a back shift. These are the things I need to know about these things. Tommy 55. I think Falkirk will be a breath of fresh air in the Premier. Yeah, absolutely. So would Partick Thistleware United. You know, these teams could develop if they were playing on a bigger stage and the prize money and the broadcast money, etc., was obviously upped. So let's develop the Scottish game. But, you know, Celtic are hamstrung by it. We can't really do a great deal about that. Stevie boy, in you come. Always great to see you on the YouTube. Heard a story about Chris Martin asking that dude why he had never told him about the Hibs fans singing Sunshine on Leith, because Guy Berryman knew that Chris Martin would murder it, probably, Stevie. That's probably why he never told him. He knew it was a good tune and he didn't want him to murder it. The Slabbering Cabbage. Celtic's performances in this season's Champions League far outweighed their Europa performances with regards to showing Scottish football in a positive light. No comparison. I totally agree with that. I absolutely agree with that. I'm going to bring up another picture, actually, just to keep the visuals on point, because new images have been leaked that will show that this is the new Celtic kit. Now, don't know what your thoughts are. What I'm going to say is, straight away, if I have to think of a player, not the one who was modelling it, I'm thinking of this player. I'm thinking of Tosh. And I'll tell you why, right? Because obviously, same colour scheme, right? Kind of similar colour scheme. And Tosh loves a pinstripe suit. So that, for me, is the Tosh McKinley outfit. There you go. We love Tosh. And by the way, Tosh is joining us with Stubbsy in Gracie's at the end of May. That is on the night of the Champions League. We're going to be covering the Champions League. It's going to be up on the big screens and all that as well. It's going to be a great night at Gracie's, and the ticket link is underneath this video. So the new jersey, Patrick, what's your thoughts on it?
It's Bumblebee-esque, isn't it? It's and I don't think I've actually ever seen that picture with Tosh, that kit before. If so, I certainly don't know. I've maybe misremembered it as the Bumblebee. It's very, very similar. That's clearly the inspiration. I quite like it. I'd definitely wear that. I mean, we've had some howlers in the past. I think we've been chatting about them the last couple of days. Some of the pink ones that we've had, New Balance and stuff. But I like a lot of the Adidas stuff. I think that one's a good one. As I say, sort of Bumblebee-esque. I think it works really well. So I'm quite happy with that. Excited to see what else they've got in store. And I don't know when that deal runs out. I'm hoping we continue with Adidas. I quite like Adidas. I know a lot of people want us to go back to Umbro, but I quite like Adidas. So quite happy with that kit.
Yeah, it's one of the things that sometimes, even when you see the official garment like that, just sitting there, you don't get the full effect of it until you actually see it in action. I know that sounds a bit weird, right? But until it's on the player, I mean, look at that. That looks tremendous on Tosh, that version of the kit. That, of course, being the second version of said kit. It used to be sponsored by Umbro. And that's what used to happen. You could then pick it up with a new sponsor. Chris, I know you didn't like the away kit from last season. It was yellow with the kind of green, the two shades of green on it, the different pinstripes. But you kind of grew to like it better. I thought it turned into a bit of a classic. What's your take on this one?
Well, I echo your comments. I think you need to see it on the player to get the full effect. And I'm always a fan of slightly more figure hugging shirts. I think they're looking more modern. The shape. You like the old style.
I like the baggier the better.
Baggy shirts. Yeah, I was just thinking that Tosh McKinley, was that 1999? That kit. I was thinking, was that 99? Because I seem to remember Henrik wearing that, and he joined in 97, 98. Sure
well, Henrik was wearing, unfortunately, wearing that kit when
he was wearing that in Leon, wasn't he?
When he injured his leg.
Yeah, that's notorious. Sure. No, the new one, I don't mind the colour scheme so much. I'm not a big fan of the, how thin and how close together the stripes are. The stripes going across the way. I'm not a huge fan of having the shirt quite as busy as that. I almost think it would work better with less of those sort of pinstripes and actually maybe just solid. But that's maybe a bit more of a purist that way. I don't like strips that are overly busy.
All right, I'm just waiting for the old Acsom Paisley pattern to get nabbed for a kit. It would look nice as a mod.
I tried that on AI. I tried to stick that on a kit on AI, and it looked all right actually.
You'll need to show us it. You will need to show us it now that you've let the cat out of the bag, right? Yeah. So we're looking forward to the Dundee United game. Yesterday, actually, we filmed This Is Acsom for Friday night, and I've got to say, something of a special episode, right? So obviously we have various guests from the world of film and media and music, football, whatever. As long as you've got a Celtic State of Mind and have an interesting story, you can be part of that show. But this week we did a round table. It was myself, Quinny from Seltzer here, Acsom Rabani, who has featured obviously prominently on Acsom, the Celtic Exchange, etc., and Tino from the Celtic Exchange. So 4 talking heads, if you like. I'm on it as well. all talking about Celtic, where we are, where we're going, and the various obstacles that might be in our way to achieving the goals. And it was really good because every one of those guys can lead the conversation, and that's exactly what happened because we're in the same room. And it was a right good discussion. So that's gone out on Friday night. Keep your eyes peeled for that. But one of the questions that I posed, Patrick, I'll come to you first, right? Is around, some of the things that have been discussed in the last few weeks, this complacency that Brendan spoke about, the fact he needs his players to have ambition. And I think what he means by that, how Ronadella used to speak about a 24/7 player, has to be on it 24/7. I think Brendan Rodgers, in his own way, was talking about having that ambition, regardless if you're playing St Johnstone at McDermott Park or Bayern Munich in the Champions League. You've got to have that ambition to win as a Celtic player, maintain the standards. So we were talking about, right, okay, it's very, very unlikely. The probability of 6 trebles in 9 seasons, Patrick, is absolutely unlikely to happen. If you had gone into a bookies and put that bet on, you'd have got long odds, right? Very, very long odds. I worked it out. I won't show you my workings, but the likelihood of it happening would be 1.5 to 4%. That's the likelihood of you winning 6 domestic trebles out of 9. So obviously, you feed the data of that happening, or the likelihood of that happening, from the history of every Scottish football league, global football league, and you say, right, is there a chance of this happening? And no, really, there is no chance. So everybody then says, but the financial gulf between you and the rest of it. Well, I'm sorry, but when you look at what we have spent on players, if you were to look at those 9 seasons, right, and look at the net spend on those 9 seasons, Patrick, I think people would be surprised. People think, we're spending £30 million a season. Right, okay, that's fine. Yeah, we have shelled that out. But we are selling players before we do it. Because sometimes we think we're overcautious, Patrick, in that respect. We're selling a star man to fund these deals. We sold Kyogo and brought in Jota. We sold Matt O'Reilly, and we spent £26 million on Ida, Engels and Trusty. That's the way we do business, right? So it's not just about throwing money and hoping that we buy trophies. That's another thing that we've heard. But what I was saying there is, people then say, you've completed Scottish football. And I think that does creep into the minds of players like maybe Reo. I've done everything I can here. I mean, I want a new challenge. These are the things that you hear. Or you want to play in a bigger league. So if we were to then say one thing we've not done in Scotland, here's one thing we haven't done in Scottish football. We've never won 10 in a row, right? So we had this discussion yesterday. We've never won 10 in a row. Nobody has, right? And if we were to win 9, the 9th would be won. Correct my maths if this is wrong, guys. In 2030-31. That would be 9 in a row. Am I right? 2030-31. Seems like a long while away, right? But Chris is doing it. Right,
I think that would be 10 in a row, would it not?
Is that the 10? Is that the 10? I don't know.
Aye.
Right. I'd need to write it down. Right, so where do you want to be as a football club at that moment in time? I remember being at school and the teacher would say, right, I want you to draw a poster of what things would look like in the year 2000, right? And we would all draw flying cars and all that kind of stuff, thinking it would be really futuristic. But then the year 2000 creeps up and you're thinking, it's not that much different, really. I mean, technology is advanced. Right, so with regards to that, it sounds like a long while away, 2030, Patrick. But actually, if we want to win 9 or 10 in a row, that's what we're looking at. Where do you see the club at that point? Because that really isn't that. I mean, 5 years down the line, it's not a million miles away, is it?
No, not at all. Not at all. You're right. I mean, we're 1 point away from wrapping up 4. As you say, in 5 years' time, 2030, you're going to be, hopefully securing 9. I think in terms of expectation, I can't see in the next 5 years anything less than a league title being the expectation. I think any manager who loses a league title gets the sack. For Celtic, I think that's the bare minimum. It's obviously a gateway into the Champions League now as well. That's the nature of European football the last sort of 20 years, and it's just ramping up. I mean, you've seen the extra revenue we've got this season, so I think bare minimum we've got to keep winning the league. So looking at it, I'd like to think we'll be 9 in a row champions. I like to think, actually, I would quite like us to be in the Champions League for all 9 of those seasons. I know we spoke about the Europa League, and I seen a stat. I might sort of speak about it in a minute. It's tempting to sort of try and get a run in there But to get the money to stay so far ahead of everyone else, to just sort of accumulate that and compound that and just constantly try and improve and buy better players. So, I've always thought that was a missed opportunity last decade. We got 9 and we were one short of the 10, but we only got in the Champions League 4 times. I mean, that was a real disappointment. The real 10 in a row would really be 10 Champions League campaigns in a row. So I think that's where I'd like to be. 9 titles in a row, 9 Champions League campaigns in a row, and from a financial point of view, if you listen to anyone else and you look at the statistics, it'd be extremely unlikely to not win 10 in a row if you've got all that financial success behind you. So that's where I'd like us to be. And failing that, I mean, I think we're going to be stuck with this playoff round for quite some time unless all the coefficients improve. So I think we're going to have that playoff round. So if we drop into Europa League, I mean, Rangers got top 8 under Philip Clement, so there's no reason why we can't get top 8. Top 8 gets you right into the round of 16. You're seeded, and so you're favourites to go through in that round. So it's not a buy into the quarterfinals, but you really should be making the quarterfinals of the Europa League if you're dropping into that competition. So with all that money behind you, I think you've got a real chance of winning that competition. The stat I wanted to bring up, an analysis was done in 2023 when the new formats were agreed. 7 of the 11 Europa League winners dropped down from 3rd place in the Champions League groups. And obviously that doesn't happen anymore, so the quality is less in the knockout stages. That's why you're seeing teams like Rangers, who are so poor domestically, go within, effectively they were 90 minutes away from the semi-finals before Bilbao put them to the sword. So I think that's an opportunity. I think that, we spoke about 5-10-year plans for the SFA and the SPFL. Celtic's 5-year plan, in my opinion, should be either 5 straight years of Champions League qualification, or if we drop down, go and try and win the Europa League. So that's where I'd like us to be. And for the record, I would really like us to do 10 in a row as well. I know we made a mess of it, and I don't want to focus on it too early on. We're only at 4, but I would really like to get that over the line in 6 years' time.
Patrick, you're phenomenal, not only with your mathematics, because you're right. 9 in a row would be 29-30. 10 in a row would be 30-31. But people will be looking at it, they're talking about 10 in a row, what are they like, entitled, etc., etc. No, I think it's a bit more to do with the planning aspect of where you would like the club to be. And the very fact that you've said the disappointment of the previous 9 is the inability to build on that in Europe. I agree with you. I also think that there were certain seasons where we could have introduced more youth players into the team when we were winning leagues at Cantors, etc. I think we should have done that. We didn't do it. So you can always look at a really great success and say, actually, it could even be better. So you're looking at the Champions League campaign. So if we think about that, we've had this season, Brendan's first season and Angie's last season. We've had 3 group stages in a row, Patrick, in the Champions League. And as you say, let's make that the aim every single campaign. And with that, you are cementing your position, aren't you, domestically, because of the amount of income that comes through, the revenue that you generate. I think on top of that, I would throw in the stadium. I think the stadium's a big part for me. I think that if there is a way of being able to increase the capacity, improve that main stand, level it all off, make it a proper world-class arena, then go for it, and then upgrade everything in and around the footprint. I think that would be tremendous. And then the engagement with fans all over the world, having some kind of global, not a season ticket in the traditional sense of attending games, but having some kind of membership scheme which brings in media, which allows people to engage with the football club a lot more when they are somewhere else on the planet. I think, I've probably, my thought process has probably changed on Acsom because we are engaging with so many people who tune in from all over the world, and we've got so many contributors from all over the world. You have an added respect, Chris, into the commitment they've got from afar, and so I think we need to embrace that as a football club as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, very simply, I want to see in 5 years from now, I want to see 5 years worth of progressive upward development at the football club. Now, whether that means from a footballing standpoint, you've got a sustained period of success, which leads you to 9 and then 10 in a row. Fantastic. Completely agree with Patrick. getting the Champions League qualification and becoming an established presence in the Champions League and a respected established presence in the Champions League would be ideal. But what I want to see is development not just at Celtic but in Scottish football, because I think without that, Celtic and Scottish football will start to drift further apart, and I think it will be to the detriment of both. And what that might mean is that in 5 years we might have to look at, do we re-engage those conversations about getting into the English league, maybe having that UK-wide league. Maybe Rangers comes along. What you would never want to see happen is that happen at the expense of Scottish football and Scottish footballing identity. So I'd never ever want to see that. And I would rather Celtic were leading at the forefront of Scottish football identity. But what we cannot do is stagnate for 5 years as a football club. You know, infrastructure, stadium, the sport as a spectacle. You know, you talk about supporters, memberships, that kind of thing, and on-field achievements. You know, these are the things that you want to all see gaining upward momentum over the next 5 years.
Yes, world class in every department, I think, is the aim, and there's certainly a wee bit to go on some of those departments. But in terms of the football, yeah, absolutely not tedious in any way, shape, or form. Being a Celtic supporter, I'll tell you that much.
Not for me.
No, absolutely not. Now, I've already mentioned that we've got Stubbsy and Tosh McKinley joining us at Gracie's at the end of May. Paddy Lavery, big, massive shout out to Paddy. Paddy's been doing a lot of work behind the scenes to get us over to Ardoyne, and we're going. We're bringing Chris Sutton as well. So if you want to get involved in that, tickets, and I'm not just saying this, they have been flying. The tickets have been flying. So a lot of those tickets will be sold by Paddy directly. Get in touch with them if you're in the area and you want to come along for a right good Celtic night.
I'm a wee bit scared. Paddy keeps saying he's going to take us all to different places in Ardoyne. I'm a bit nervous about it.
If you're with Paddy, you'll be fine. You'll be absolutely fine. Big shout out to you as always, and everybody else who's tuned in. We are pushing our subscription base on YouTube. Why are we doing that? Well, it does help. With notifications, letting everybody know when we're going to be going live, etc. We do have This Is Acsom fully produced every Friday night, and we're going to be fully produced every day before you know it. All the plans are in place, and that is happening. 50,000 Celtic fans, that's what we want on the channel. YouTube, if you've not subscribed, you can do it right now, free of charge. And if you liked what you've seen today, give us a big thumbs up on the video and join us again tomorrow at 12:30 on A Celtic State of Mind.